really care about and start telling the world about them.
Welcome to the Learn Skin podcast with me, Dr. Raja.
And me, Dr. Hadar, where we discuss all things skin.
Join us as we delve into the art and science of skin health in today's episode.
Hey, Raja, can you say the thing I told you to tell them?
Of course. We are board-certified dermatologists. This podcast is meant for educational and informational purposes only and is not considered medical advice, nor does it serve as a substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. All opinions shared do not express the views of Learn Health, Inc. Let's get to the good stuff.
Hey, Raja, how are you today?
You know, Hadar, I do a lot of thinking, but I also do a lot of listening, my friend. And, I love listening to EDM music. And one of my favorite groups is Above and Beyond. Are we going to talk about them today?
No, we will talk about how to go above and beyond just being a good dermatologist and actually becoming the best integrative dermatologist you can be, and using all the tools in the toolbox, including branding and sales and marketing, and how to get over that little hump that a lot of us learn. You may have come to our IDS, you may have taken some of our courses, but really what you want to do is now leverage this into patient care. And so I think we found the prototypical child of this that really went above and beyond.
That's right. I'm feeling lucky, and I thought I found my lucky clover, but guess what? We went to Plover, Wisconsin, and we found Dr. Stephen Lewellis. He's at Above and Beyond Dermatology. We had to do the joke. I'm sorry, everyone. I'll let myself out at the end again, but we had to. And Stephen, welcome to the podcast. We are super excited to talk all kinds of stuff about dermatology today.
Thank you, Raja. Thank you, Hadar, longtime listener, first-time caller, and it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm just grateful to be in your presence and excited to hopefully share some solid tips with our listeners.
Absolutely. Let's jump into it, because you are a board certified dermatologist, and then you went on and decided to really grow your knowledge base and joined the integrative dermatology program, right? Is that where things started for you, or did it start earlier, your interest in going beyond just the regular dermatology that we learned in residency?
Great question. This started in earnest. It started shortly after a fair amount of people, if they know my story, know this part of it, was terminated from a position that I had quite out of the blue, abruptly, without cause. So just a parting of ways, but it was completely out of the blue and unexpected for me. So I, after that point, knew in my heart that I, wasn't fit to have a proper job and be an employee. I wasn't really acting like an employee within the place that I was at. So I think it's reasonable that they thought we should part ways. I was acting more like a business owner, but with the benefits of being an employee. So when I did separate from my prior position, I knew that going out on my own was what I needed to do and what was going to make me very happy being a dermatologist. And I also knew that being out on my own, I needed to distinguish myself from the status quo. And I thought that was very important if I was going to be a successful, at first, solo private dermatologist and hopefully part of a big team eventually, and going, like we said, above and beyond. That's why I chose the name for a lot of reasons, but going beyond the status quo of the typical patient experience, because I don't have the size and the scale of a lot of my competitors. So I have to play a different game, and I have certain advantages as a small business owner that they don't have. So I have to take advantage of those.
Stephen, this is awesome. And actually, can you talk a little bit more about the notion of either, being someone that was meant to be in a good employee position, or like you said, you were someone that was in an employee position but didn't quite fit. I mean, we have a lot of people that are entering into dermatology as residents, maybe a lot of people that are in a position right now trying to figure out, is this the right fit? What makes someone a good fit to be in an employee position versus what you were saying where you felt like, hey, this isn't the right kind of fit for me? Like, what was it that you think people would jive with in either of those kind of scenarios?
Sure. And I can, of course, only speak for myself, but I'll tell my own story from both sides of that fence. I had a typical job that a physician of my vintage would sometimes feel like you get out of residency and that's one of the only things you can do. You just go get a job somewhere, whether it's academia or a large practice, private equity, whatever. And so that's what I did. And I needed that. And I was very fortunate to be in that position for about 4 years. And as I became more accustomed to the ins and outs of seeing patients and taking care of patients independently, I started opening my eyes to other things because I had more bandwidth. And then that's when I started, within the comfort of being an employee, started asking questions that a large corporation probably doesn't want its employees to be asking. And I am completely understanding of the decision they made, especially as a business owner now. There are significant trade offs, but the trade offs of being an employee were right for me for those 4 years. And the trade offs of being a business owner are right for me now. And I always tell people that if you hear someone like me shouting from the rooftops about independent practice, private practice, direct care, and I don't only do direct care, anything like that, if you are happy in your job, whatever it might be, ignore me. That's my best advice.
Well, what would you say are the
Go
pros
ahead.
and cons of like being in an employee position? Maybe, we can talk about from your perspective, obviously the cons outweighed the pros, but what are some of the pros of being in an employee position?
The pros that I see are safety and security, stability. Those three S's, I guess. Our jobs are quite stable relative to others. I proved to myself that nothing is completely stable and secure, no matter how much you think it is. But more so than owning a practice, you have the stability of, this is when I need to show up, this is how long I need to be there, these are the jobs I need to do, and then I get to go home. And then in return for that, you get paid.
And you're off the clock, right? Typically
Yeah,
when you get
yeah,
home.
on and off the clock, essentially. So you get that separation from the ins and outs of running the business. And the trade offs are, your compensation is a big one. Your compensation is relatively linear. If you want to make more money, your boss is probably going to say, see more patients. That's what a lot of doctors get told, especially in an era where just getting a raise to keep up with inflation is not the norm, at least in what I've experienced. So the ability is the main benefit in my mind. You know what's coming, and coming out of residency, that's what I needed. That's what my family needed. That's what I needed. And I had no interest in starting a business all of a sudden. And then on the other side, if you're feeling the itch to like, oh, why do they do it this way? Or I really wish I could do this, or why there's all this red tape. That's when the entrepreneur route or business ownership route is pulling at you, because you can't both be an employee but also be pounding your fist about those various things on a daily or weekly basis. That's kind of trying to have your cake and eat it too, and I certainly learned that. And you can be both of those people throughout your career, where there's nothing wrong with having a job for a while and then doing what I'm doing, or doing what I'm doing and then going back to having a job. There are people who do that as well.
Yes, thank you, Stephen, for really going through this, because I think what is interesting is that people make certain choices coming out of residency or their final training, and then really maybe it's the right decision at the right time, but then things change and some people are not really in tune with themselves or with the with the reality around them, and get stuck. And I think that's why we see a lot of physicians and other clinicians who may not be happy in a specialty that we should be fairly satisfied with what we do. So you took the step forward and you became independent. How did you start setting up your own brand, and what are the little tips that you gathered along the way doing that?
I think it starts with awareness of the importance of your brand and acknowledging that you have a brand regardless of whether you like it or not.
Like it or not, you have it. It's yours. Yeah.
Yeah, you have a brand always, and that's how people perceive you. And that's either going to be good or bad or somewhere in between. And acknowledging that and then taking control over it and approaching it, for me, I see that as a wonderful thing. I get to control a lot of that and steer my brand in a direction that I want to, that is aligned with how I envision that patients want to be taken care of and the experience that I think patients want and that I would want as well. And that's not like patient walks in and they just tell me what they want and then I give them that and they're happy and I get 5 stars, but how they want to feel when they enter a business. Not doesn't have to be dermatology. I actually love learning from other businesses. I think a lot
Right.
about Starbucks when I walk into Starbucks. How do I
Yeah.
feel when I walk in? And somebody spent a lot of time making the manual that allows an 18-year-old to run a Starbucks. And I think a lot about that in the context of healthcare and dermatology, especially because what my patients tell me. They have long waits, they have short times with their doctor when they finally get in. They are not often felt seen or heard, or they're sometimes even belittled when they ask about things that we talk about within integrative dermatology, whether it's gut health or hormones or herbal medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, all of these things. And they seek me out because they might get an impression that I'm not going to make them feel that way, and I'm going to welcome those things.
Thank you, Stephen. Can you give us some more specific
Mhm.
examples how things, I don't know, you saw at Starbucks or listening to
Sure.
your patients really made meaningful changes in how you design your practice or your brand?
One thing, and I know Hadar, prior to the show, you you said, so this is on me. You don't like talking about podcasting on a podcast to people who don't necessarily have podcasts, and I totally agree with that. But that is one thing that I did. Shortly after I was terminated, I think it was about 4 months, January 4th, 2024, I started a podcast because I knew the long-term value of that medium. And it doesn't have to be a podcast. Start a blog, start contributing something in public, create something in public that aligns with who you are as a physician. That's part of your brand, is so that people can find it out and give it a try and decide if they like you or don't like you. And I think that's one of the best tricks that I can offer. Let people decide ahead of time if they are into what you're selling or not, because I'm weeding out people who are going to hate me, even not hate, that's a strong word, but not going to
Right.
jive with me for whatever reason. And I expect there to be people like that. But ahead of time, those people can say, don't like the sound of his voice. I'm going to go somewhere else. And they never
Right.
have to pick up the phone. And I also never have to risk the experience with, trying to do everything I can, but they're not going to like me no matter what.
It is very clever what you're saying right now because I myself still can't believe that people come in and say, oh, I saw your video
Mm.
online or I heard your podcast or something like that. I think that we underestimate a lot of times, at least me, how much people are looking into their doctors, trying to understand. Not everybody, of course. People just come in because it's their plan or because their significant other scheduled the appointment for them. But those who really care, want to know more, usually will take that extra step. And being out there, I think, is very clever. Not just something, I think, everybody's doing podcasts for different reasons, but that's definitely a great reason, as you're saying, to make sure that the people who find you really are interested in what you have to offer. So very clever. You have another example? I can't wait for a Starbucks example.
When I think of Starbucks, I think about the consistency of the experience and how I feel when I'm driving up to a Starbucks. I'm always excited to go into a Starbucks.
Yes,
So is my
yes.
wife, and so is every single one of her friends. And there
By the way,
is
across the world,
across the world,
yeah,
absolutely.
everywhere you go in
You're
the
right.
U.S., everywhere you go, there's a Starbucks. The same. Maybe their soy milk is not the same in every
Yeah.
country, but other than that, yes. Go ahead. Yeah.
Absolutely. There are certain consistencies, and that's part of branding. Part of a brand is being consistent about the things that you really stand for and that you care about, and being unwavering and uncompromising in upholding those standards and meeting those standards. And it doesn't mean you're never going to fall flat in those areas, but also being accountable when you do, because you don't want to be a hypocrite and you certainly don't want to be perceived as a hypocrite. Back to Starbucks, I try, when people come in to me, from the moment they either see me online or come into the clinic, I want them to feel a certain way that feels very different from the typical large clinic experience. And there are some large clinics that do it amazing, and I try to learn from them, but there are also ones that are just kind of pretty average experience and almost taking the customer for granted because of the insurances or whatever it is. There's so much demand out there that a lot of dermatology clinics, I think, take their patients for granted. And I try not to do that. So I try to give that feeling of hospitality as soon as they walk in. And I want them to be excited about coming to see me rather than feeling like, oh, I got to go to the doctor. Just like I'm excited when I see a Starbucks. I even, just when I see the logo on the road, I get a certain feeling even if I'm not going there. And that's eventually what I want people to feel when they maybe see my logo.
That's great. And I wanted to maybe shift gears a little bit and ask you how you managed to bring integrative dermatology now into this context. So you took us through
Yeah.
some of the initial energy that motivated you and creating a podcast, making this more consistent kind of environment? Maybe some other tips you want to share, but really now what you said originally is how to separate yourself, right? How to take yourself above and beyond, right? So maybe you can tell us, you got some training, and then how did you leverage that in the practice?
First of all, the courage to invest in myself and bet on myself. The training is not inexpensive, and it's not a small use of time and resource. So it's resource intensive in both financially and time wise for someone who is starting a small business and not having a tremendous cash flow from a job or other things. It's not by any means prohibitively expensive, and it's worth way more to me than what I paid for it. But as a person who had a very tight budget at that time, I had to have the courage to do it. And the reason I invested in that is because that's the market that I saw. People fairly often reach out to me about these kind of things, and I say, we are very lucky to be in dermatology. The market conditions are extraordinarily beneficial, favorable to us. There is very high demand, relatively limited supply. And especially if you are targeting a certain niche of people who are looking for a certain experience, that's even more favorable because I never want to just be known as a general dermatologist. I want to be known as the guy who, when you have, or like how I think about Steve Dave Louis, right? If I, Dr. Steve Dave Louis, for anyone who doesn't know, but hopefully you do know him if you're a listener to this show, if I happen to have hidradenitis suppurativa, I want to end up in Steve's clinic. And that is, people want an HS expert if they have HS. They want a vitiligo expert if they have vitiligo. They don't want a general dermatologist, in my opinion. And the more you can differentiate yourself, the higher the value of your services become. You can still choose to sell them for whatever you want, but the higher value they become, the higher the demand becomes for your services from that very devoted group of people. And people who have a certain problem that they care very much about value solutions to that problem. So that's the business proposition to me. It's not about taking advantage of people. It's finding people who want who really value what I am good at selling. I don't sell Mohs surgery. I'm a crappy Mohs surgeon. I don't do Mohs surgery. That's not what I'm for. I'm going to find you a Mohs surgeon who's great at what they do if they need that. But that's niching down like that is really meaningful. Even if you become known as an HS expert, that doesn't mean you can't take care of lots of other things as well. But within these more chronic diseases, there's so much integrative stuff that these people are really looking for someone to validate that there is other stuff out there. And then we can come in and help parse out the misinformation from the stuff that could actually help them. And we could touch on that as well. That's, marketing versus what actually works and marrying those two things.
Yeah. So first of all, I thought when you mentioned the good old Dave Louis, in the context of branding, I thought you were going to say something about his beard,
Yeah,
and,
and that
and
helps.
talk about a person who owned
Yes.
his brand ever, the great Steve Dave Louis. So a big shout out to our friend here
Or
and
Peter
co-chair.
Leo. If I have eczema, if my kid has eczema, I want to end up in the Chicago Integrative Derm
No,
Center,
it's
right?
true.
Or the
But Dave
Integrative
Louis
Eczema
got
Center.
the facial hair branding.
Yes, Stephen. So you get this training, which I think you said so nicely. You really take the kind of courage to invest in yourself, and we all have these moments for sure. And now you bring this back to your practice. Did you find ways to maybe marry the unique design of your practice with the brand, with integrative? Were there kind of ways that really it started to jive and synergize and now you're taking off? Did you find those areas where there was synergy between the way you practice, your brand, and all this Starbucks experience you mentioned? How did that work out now adding the integrative element?
I think the integrative element is critical to it because it is a big differentiating factor that is real and concrete rather than just talk about just telling people I'm different and the experience is going to be different. That's a large part of how it actually is different from an actual diagnostics and management aspect of the business. Not just that patient who's maybe seeing me and they're on Medicaid for insurance, they can still have a nice Fiji water or whatever it is and a great cup of coffee and a lovely place to sit down while they're waiting for their appointment, just right alongside a person who might be having a cosmetic procedure. That's part of what I'm trying to deliver. So that is part of the experience, but also once they get in the exam room, it needs to also be different. And I need to deliver on that rather than just blowing smoke up my own butt, if you will. So that the integrative part of it is a huge, because I know a lot of stuff is out there, but I didn't know where to start with it. And I knew that learning from experts is way more efficient, and paying for that, which the experts absolutely deserve to be paid for that, for them to package the information for me, teach me from their experience. It just accelerates my ability to now sit down with a patient and say, these are the options in the conventional realm, and I can also tell you about these things. And I'm gradually adding more and more. And I think Raja has said before, just add things gradually. Just get really good at talking about one or two things that you really believe in that are resonating with patients, and then gradually add more as those become second nature. And then I live in a small town, so word gets out. And a lot of people who have a problem that they really value, that they're struggling to find a solution for, they also know people who are also in that same or similar position, and they're going to tell them.
Yeah, Stephen, you nailed it right there, which is, I really appreciate you making that reference, which is that you don't have to do 45-minute visits. Part of the branding can be, hey, I'm integrative and I'm efficient too,
Yeah,
and I can get you
absolutely.
in and out and
Yes.
still we can talk about things. And then, yeah, the other part of the brand is people talk and then they tell their friends. And then in a small town, like you said, you don't have to, the brand is how you treat your patients too, part of it, which is pretty cool.
I kind of jumped on your website and I encourage others to look at, what is this, aboveandbeyondderm.com. And you're right. And I think I told you that. I really think that there's a vibe there talking about the brand and how to communicate that on your website. And what I thought was cute is payment made simple. So this is text from aboveandbeyondderm.com, right? And money is a critical part of any good business. So talking about money upfront, right? And so we don't shy away from talking about it. I think that's kind of experience that's clear, transparent. The first thing you see when you log in is we're not your typical dermatologist. So know exactly who you are, that you're different, that you're trying to separate yourself from the pack. All these are really kind of nice way of putting your brand forward and trying to communicate that. I wanted to give you some space maybe to share some other tips you learned along the way, be it about branding or marketing. I think you said something about marketing and how to make that better choices for your practice.
Yes, and this is something I am living in real time and struggling with mightily as I'm trying to learn it, because it is a very hard thing and not something we are spend a lot of time earlier in our careers learning about in a systematic way, at least. Especially as a small business, my marketing budget is slim and it can go fast. So learning to focus your story. First of all, knowing your story. Everyone has a story, and learn to communicate it. I'm a member of Toastmasters International, for instance, and that's where I go once every 2 weeks to learn how to talk better. Part of talking better is knowing your story in a consistent way that resonates with your target audience. And that's constantly evolving, but I'm always trying to think about how I can deliver that message. And whether that's through the website, through my podcast, through things I say to people in person when I pick up the phone, or when I pick up the phone when they call me. And one aspect of that consistency and that storytelling for me is having core values. And when I hear core values, I cringe and I think corporate speak. And it can be, so it's a double-edged sword. But mine, it says it right on my business card. It says access, hospitality, trust, and accountability. And I try to use those four things as a decision-making filter for all things that I do in my practice, so that if I'm playing devil's advocate and saying, okay, that sounds cool, but where can I clearly tell this guy he's a hypocrite? And so if I had a 6-month wait and my business card said access, I'd be a fraud. If I was my patient, I would tell me I was a fraud. Things always remembering those things, because those are four things I truly care about, but then I have to live them. And it also helps me make decisions, because there's tons of decisions that you have to make. And if you don't have a rubric for making those in terms of what you're spending your time on, your money, how you're taking care of people, it is going to be even more overwhelming than it already is. So learn your story, tell it. It doesn't have to be anything extraordinary. Just know what you care about, start talking about those things. And the simpler it is, the better. And just tell those things over and over again. I love hearing from people who know their talking points, and I just hear them again and again. And it's like music to my ears when they deliver them, because they sound great, they sound confident, and they're helpful. I think when you're first starting out, don't try to spread too far. Hone in on a few things you really care about and start telling the world about them.
Stephen, this has been so awesome. I mean, so many nice tips, and just to hear about how you've kind of done this from the ground up. I mean, it just goes to show, some of this is just taking growing pains as they come, but also, trying to be sensitive to the fact that branding does matter. Two books that I found really, really helpful when I was going through medical training and afterwards, maybe actually the singular book that was the most important is that I found the most important. And I may have said this before, but Dale Carnegie's book on how to win friends and influence people, it kind of teaches you how to have common sense when you're talking to others. It's kind of funny, and they only teach it in business school. I wish they taught it in medical schools because we deal with people all the time, and sometimes you got to figure out what's important, what's not important, not just with patients. If you're a business owner, you're always trying to make inroads and connections with each other. And what I love about the book is they tell you how to do these things genuinely, not being fake, but finding those genuine little pieces of nuggets of information about someone else and having a way to find connections with each other. And then it blossoms into all kinds of really cool relationships. So anyway, I think the point here is, Stephen, you have definitely taken this podcast above and beyond. And we really appreciate your time. And going back to what you said, Hadar, you said his website is a vibe. Well, I have to end by saying, Above and Beyond always gives me a really nice feeling because I love their music. I've been to Goa in India. For all of you that haven't been to Goa in India, it's an amazing place, amazing music, and it was New Year's, and boy, it was an amazing party. And they take the music above and beyond. And just like that, I mean, Stephen, I think your approach here is exactly what you say it is, which is going farther for your patients. So we really appreciate your time and thanks for joining us.
Well, Raja and Hadar, to take an example from Dale Carnegie, I think he says that everyone's favorite word is their own name, something like that. That is a fantastic book, and it's authentic too. It doesn't feel fraudulent. I think that's what gets a lot of people cringing about sales and marketing, and it makes them run away from it. And that's very costly to do that, but it doesn't have to be salesy or the things we associate with it. So I really appreciate that. And he also says, keep the main thing the main thing. And I think that's a much more concise way of saying what I was trying to say before about pick a few things, just talk about it and don't be a blowhard like I do sometimes. So I'm always working on it. And thank you all for your time, for sharing your audience with me. Getting on other people's stages like this is a valuable lesson I've learned along the way. And if you want to grow your brand, you definitely need to get on other people's stages and express your gratitude to them for that.
Well, thank you very much. And that's a wrap for today's episode. But Raja, every time we dive into these conversations, it feels like there's still so much more to uncover.
Exactly, Hadar. That's why I look forward to IDS every year. It's the perfect place to continue exploring the latest in research, sharing ideas, and learning how to apply integrative strategies in real-world dermatology practice.
And this year's theme couldn't be more relevant. Guide your patients towards a healthy biome and optimal skin health. We know that skin health isn't just about treating the surface. It's about understanding the biome and how it connects to the overall health of our patients.
And that's exactly what we'll be tackling at the 8th Integrative Dermatology Symposium happening August 21st through the 24th at the Westin La Paloma Resort and Spa in Tucson, Arizona.
Now, we've got an amazing lineup of expert-led sessions covering key dermatology conditions like eczema, psoriasis, vitiligo, alopecia areata, and melasma, plus insights into how movement, weight loss, and even coca polyphenols can impact your skin health.
Now, who doesn't want some good cocoa polyphenols? I know you do, Hadar. And what really makes IDS special is the interactive format. It's not just about sitting through lectures, and we really make that a point. We'll have real-world case discussions, hands-on workshops, and plenty of opportunities to connect with colleagues who are just as passionate about integrative dermatology as we are.
And folks, let's not forget about the location, the Westin La Paloma Resort and Spa. That's the perfect place to learn and recharge. And you can relax by the waterfalls, stargaze under the Arizona sky, play around a golf or tennis, or unwind at the spa. And of course, we'll have evening receptions where you can catch up with your colleagues and make new connections.
Now, who doesn't want to go stargazing and whisper sweet integrative everythings, not nothings, Hadar, to each other? Now, that sounds like the ideal way to learn, recharge, and connect all in one weekend. And if you haven't already, head over to integrativedermatologysymposium.com to check out all the details and save your spot now.
That's integrativedermatologysymposium.com. And as a special thank you to our podcast listeners, we're excited to offer 15% off your IDS registration. Just use the code podcast15 when you sign up. Simply head over to integrativedermatologysymposium.com to register. We can't wait to see you at IDS 2025 in Tucson, Arizona. Let's take integrative dermatology to the next level together.